Mitchell extended her hand for a handshake. "Officer, you might be interested to know that part of what we teach here is how to read situations and people accurately. Tonight, you demonstrated some of those same skills. You recognized when the situation wasn't what it initially appeared to be, and you adapted accordingly." As they shook hands, Riley realized he had learned something important about assumptions and first impressions. The woman he had initially perceived as a potential threat was actually someone whose job was training the most elite soldiers in the country. His training had taught him to be cautious and suspicious, but tonight had taught him the value of remaining open to possibilities he hadn't anticipated. "Commander, can I ask you one more question?" "Of course. How do you train someone to stay as calm as you did tonight?" Mitchell smiled again. "Practice, Officer Riley. Lots and lots of practice. We put people in high-stress situations repeatedly until staying calm becomes their default response rather than their exceptional response. Tonight was good practice for both of us." Riley left the warehouse with a story he knew his colleagues would find hard to believe. He had drawn his weapon on a woman who turned out to be a Navy commander responsible for training SEALs and other special operations forces. More importantly, he had learned that sometimes the most dangerous-looking situations turn out to be the most enlightening ones. Mitchell completed her inspection of the facility, noting in her report that the building's security had been tested inadvertently by local law enforcement and had performed adequately. She also noted that the responding officer had demonstrated tactical awareness and professional judgment that would serve him well if he ever considered applying for specialized law enforcement positions. 3 weeks later, the facility officially opened, and Mitchell began training the first class of special operations candidates in urban combat techniques. The warehouse that had once seemed abandoned became the site where some of the most elite soldiers in the world learned skills that would save lives and complete critical missions. Officer Riley continued his patrol duties, but he found himself thinking differently about the assumptions he made during encounters with civilians. The night he held a Navy SEAL trainer at gunpoint had taught him that people are not always what they initially appear to be, and that sometimes the most important part of police work is knowing when to reassess a situation, rather than simply react to it. 6 months later, Riley received a letter from Commander Mitchell, informing him that his professional conduct during their encounter had been noted in her official reports, and that if he ever considered applying for specialized training or federal law enforcement positions, she would be happy to provide a recommendation. The letter concluded with an invitation to tour the training facility, which by then had gained a reputation as one of the most advanced military training centers in the country. Riley accepted the invitation, and during his tour, he saw rooms designed to simulate urban combat environments, advanced tactical training equipment, and classrooms where elite soldiers learned skills that would be deployed in operations around the world. Mitchell introduced him to several instructors, many of whom were veterans of classified missions in multiple theaters of operation. At the end of the tour, Mitchell and Riley stood in the same spot where their initial encounter had taken place 6 months earlier. The space had been transformed into a tactical training center, complete with movable walls, multiple entry points, and sophisticated monitoring equipment. "You know, Officer Riley," Mitchell said, "that night when you responded to the suspicious activity call, you actually became part of an unplanned training exercise. The situation required both of us to assess threats, verify information, and make decisions based on incomplete data. Those are exactly the skills we teach here." Riley looked around the facility, impressed by its sophistication and scale. "Commander, I have to ask, what would have happened if I had made different decisions that night? What if I had been more aggressive, or less willing to verify your credentials?" Mitchell considered the question carefully. "That's a good question, Officer Riley. If you had been less professional, the situation could have escalated quickly. I would have had to decide whether to reveal classified information to protect myself or maintain operational security at personal risk. Either choice would have had consequences beyond just our individual encounter." "And if I had been more aggressive, then you would have discovered that I don't just train elite soldiers, Officer Riley. I am one." Riley understood the implication. The woman he had held at gunpoint was not only qualified to train Navy SEALs, but was herself trained to the same standards. The calm demeanor he had observed was not just professional composure, but the confidence of someone who had faced far more dangerous situations and emerged successfully. "Commander, can I tell you something? That night changed how I approach my job. I still respond to calls with appropriate caution, but I also try to remain open to the possibility that situations might not be what they initially appear to be." That's excellent judgment, Officer Riley. In special operations, we call that tactical flexibility, the ability to adapt your response as new information becomes available. It's one of the most important skills an operator can develop. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new class of trainees, 24 men and women who would spend the next 16 weeks learning advanced combat techniques, hostage rescue procedures, and specialized tactical operations. Mitchell excused herself to begin the orientation process, but not before making Riley an offer that surprised him. "Officer Riley, we're always looking for qualified instructors who understand both tactical operations and civilian law enforcement. If you ever decide you want a change of career, I think you might find this work interesting." Riley watched as Mitchell addressed the new class of trainees, noting the immediate respect and attention she commanded. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned her position through demonstrated competence, rather than just rank or time in service. The soldiers, men and women from various branches of the military, listened with the intensity of people who knew their lives might depend on what they learned in this facility. Over the following months, Riley found himself thinking frequently about Mitchell's offer. His work as a patrol officer was important and satisfying, but the possibility of training elite soldiers presented challenges and opportunities he had never considered. Eventually, he decided to explore the option, beginning with additional training in tactical operations and specialized law enforcement techniques. 1 year after their initial encounter, Riley submitted his application for a position as a civilian contractor at Mitchell's training facility. His application package included detailed letters of recommendation from his supervising officers, documentation of his additional training, and a personal statement describing how his perspective on law enforcement had evolved since that night in the warehouse. Mitchell reviewed Riley's application personally, noting not only his qualifications and training, but also his performance during their initial encounter. In her evaluation, she wrote that Riley had demonstrated tactical awareness, professional judgment, and the ability to adapt to unexpected situations, qualities that were essential for success in special operations training. Riley was accepted into the instructor training program, a rigorous 16-week course that taught civilian law enforcement officers how to contribute to military special operations training. The program covered advanced tactical procedures, threat assessment, urban combat techniques, and specialized instruction methods. During his training, Riley learned that the encounter with Mitchell had become something of a case study used in the facility's instruction program. New trainees were presented with the scenario as an example of how situations requiring tactical assessment can develop in unexpected ways, and how professional conduct can turn potentially dangerous encounters into learning opportunities. 6 months after completing his instructor training, Riley found himself working alongside Mitchell to develop new training scenarios based on civilian law enforcement encounters. Their collaboration combined his practical experience in patrol work with her expertise in special operations training, creating realistic scenarios that prepared military personnel for the complex situations they might encounter during domestic operations or international missions in urban environments. The warehouse that had once seemed abandoned had become one of the most advanced military training facilities in the country. Students from various branches of the military, federal law enforcement agencies, and allied nations came to learn techniques that would be applied in operations around the world. The facility's reputation for excellence was built on the expertise of instructors like Mitchell, who combined extensive combat experience with proven teaching ability. Riley's transition from patrol officer to military instructor had been successful beyond his expectations. His law enforcement background provided valuable perspective on civilian-military interactions, while his tactical training had expanded his understanding of complex operational environments. Most importantly, His experience with Mitchell had taught him that professional excellence often involves the ability to recognize when situations are not what they initially appear to be. 2 years after their first encounter, Riley and Mitchell were selected to present their collaborative training methods at a national conference on special operations instruction. Their presentation, titled Tactical Flexibility in Unexpected Encounters, used their initial meeting as an example of how professional conduct and accurate threat assessment can transform potentially dangerous situations into learning opportunities. During their presentation, Mitchell told the audience of military instructors and law enforcement professionals that the most important lesson from their encounter was not about tactical procedures or threat assessment, but about the value of maintaining professional standards regardless of circumstances. She noted that Riley's conduct during their initial meeting had demonstrated the kind of character and judgment that made him an excellent candidate for specialized training positions. Riley's portion of the presentation focused on how the encounter had changed his approach to law enforcement and instruction. He emphasized that the most important skills for both patrol officers and military instructors were the abilities to assess situations accurately, adapt to unexpected developments, and maintain professional standards under pressure. The presentation was well received by the conference attendees, many of whom were dealing with similar challenges in their own training programs. The collaboration between a former patrol officer and an elite military instructor provided a model for how civilian law enforcement and military training could complement each other in preparing personnel for complex operational environments. Following the conference, Riley and Mitchell were invited to develop a comprehensive training program that could be used by law enforcement agencies and military units across the country. The program, called Professional Encounter Management, combined tactical training with interpersonal communication skills, teaching participants how to handle unexpected situations while maintaining operational security and personal safety. The program's success led to additional opportunities for both instructors. Mitchell was promoted to oversee multiple training facilities, while Riley became the lead civilian instructor for law enforcement integration programs. Their initial encounter, which had begun with a weapon being drawn in a supposedly abandoned warehouse, had evolved into a professional partnership that was improving training standards across multiple agencies. 3 years after that night, Riley received notification that he had been selected for advanced instructor training at a classified facility. The selection process had been highly competitive, with candidates from various military and law enforcement backgrounds competing for a limited number of positions. Mitchell had served on the selection board, though she had recused herself from voting on Riley's application due to their professional relationship. The advanced training program would prepare Riley to instruct elite military units in specialized operations that required coordination between military personnel and civilian law enforcement agencies. The skills he would learn would be applied in training soldiers for missions involving counterterrorism, hostage rescue, and complex urban operations in both domestic and international environments. As Riley prepared to begin the advanced program, he reflected on the path that had brought him from a routine patrol call to selection for one of the most prestigious instructor positions in military training. The encounter with Mitchell had changed not only his career trajectory, but also his understanding of how individual encounters can have far-reaching consequences. Mitchell's story was equally well known, serving as an example of how elite military personnel should conduct themselves when interacting with civilian authorities. Her calm professionalism during the initial encounter with Riley had demonstrated the kind of character and judgment that made her an exceptional instructor and leader. The impact of their encounter extended beyond their individual careers. The training methods they developed together were adopted by facilities across the country, improving the quality of instruction provided to thousands of military and law enforcement personnel. Their collaborative approach had demonstrated that civilian and military training could be combined effectively to produce better prepared personnel for complex operational environments. Years later, both Riley and Mitchell would look back on that rainy night in the warehouse as a pivotal moment in their careers. What had begun as a routine patrol call and a classified facility inspection had evolved into a partnership that influenced training standards across multiple agencies and improved the preparation of elite personnel for challenging assignments. The abandoned warehouse had been transformed into a world-class training facility, but more importantly, the encounter between a patrol officer and a Navy SEAL trainer had demonstrated that professional excellence, accurate judgment, and mutual respect could turn unexpected situations into opportunities for growth and collaboration. Their story became a reminder that assumptions about people based on first impressions can be misleading, and that the most important encounters are often the ones that challenge our preconceptions and expand our understanding of what is possible when people approach difficult situations with professionalism and open minds.